Okay, so we're diving deep today, and it's fascinating stuff, really. We're looking at spiritual responsibility, especially through, the teachings of Jesus, right?
Right.
And we're going to unpack, we're going to take apart, we're going to look at some of these excerpts from understanding spiritual responsibility through Jesus' teachings. And this is something, this text, you guys have been sharing it with us. And it seems like you're really, really interested in, how our actions,
Mhm.
right, reflect true Christian values, maybe even more so than just words.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a real key point that this text kind of emphasizes. It
Yeah.
goes beyond just, the old saying walking the walk,
Right.
and really tries to dive deep into, what does living testimony really mean, in the context of Christian faith.
Okay, so how does this text approach that, this living testimony? What makes it
Yeah.
more than just being a good person?
Well, it's interesting because the text really connects this idea of living testimony to, this idea that Christians armed with the knowledge of eternity, right?
Right.
And spiritual truths, that they have a unique responsibility. And it's not about, standing on a street corner and reciting scripture, but rather letting, those truths that, letting those really shape your interactions and your choices and almost becoming, this walking example.
So it's less about telling people about it and more about showing them, kind of.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the text even goes on to say, those who have spiritual knowledge and make good use of it will receive even more, while those who neglect their spiritual gifts will lose even the little they have.
Wow.
And so it's almost like this idea of the more you practice, compassion, forgiveness, all of these qualities, the more it kind of becomes, a part of who you are.
Yeah, it's like that saying, use it or lose it.
Yeah.
But instead of like a language or something like that, it's just like, it's about spiritual growth.
Yeah.
So how do we actually use these qualities then?
Right. Well, the text dives into some specific behaviors, and honestly, they're challenging. Like there's one phrase that really stood out to me, and it says, "clothing ourselves with entrails of mercy."
Whoa.
It's this graphic image, but it highlights how deeply ingrained, compassion and mercy should be.
Yeah, I mean, entrails of mercy is a little bit intense, but I get it. It's not just like, surface level being nice to someone. It's something that really, really motivates you from deep down.
Absolutely. And that's where the text brings in, the teachings of Paul of Tarsus, especially his letters to the early Christian communities, because he really understood how difficult it can be to live up to these ideals, especially when you're surrounded by, non-believers.
Right. So how did he say that people should approach that?
Well, he really emphasized a few key things. One was genuine goodness, humility, and then this idea of, he calls it a spirit fraternity, and he believed that these qualities were essential for combating, the selfishness and the pride that can so easily take root in us.
Yeah, it's really easy to feel good, right, after, a powerful sermon or something, or even just when you're surrounded by your community. But how do we translate that into lasting change in our lives? I mean, have you ever felt that kind of disconnect? Like,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think many people, on the path of spiritual growth, they feel that. And Paul, he didn't see it as a one-time event, but it was this continual process, almost training your mind, your spirit to react differently to the world.
that actually connects really well to one of Jesus's teachings that really made me stop and think when I read it. To those who have, more will be given, and from those who have not, even what they have will be taken away.
Right.
So how does the text, apply that to spiritual responsibility?
Well, it frames it almost like investing,
Okay.
not just with money, but with qualities like compassion, responsibility, forgiveness. And it's almost like the more you spend your compassion, the more you actually have to give. It kind of multiplies.
Oh, wow.
Just like talents in that parable.
So let's say I volunteer my time, right, to help someone,
Oh,
or I go out of my way to forgive someone who's wronged me. Are those actions, they're increasing my capacity for those things?
precisely. But on the flip side, right? If we hoard these qualities, or if we let these opportunities for, kindness and compassion just pass us by, they kind of diminish. We lose that ability.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
There's also this idea in the text, and this one's really challenging, where it talks about suffering. and how suffering can actually play a role in spiritual growth. And I mean, that seems kind of counterintuitive, that something painful could actually be beneficial.
Right. And the text, it's really careful, to not present it as like a punishment or anything,
Right.
But rather as this potential turning point.
Mhm.
It's almost sometimes we get so off course that we need, we need something kind of drastic to happen to kind of jolt us back to, to our values.
So if we're really living out the spiritual responsibility, those sharp turns might not be needed because we're already striving to live in that mindful and compassionate way.
That's one way to interpret it, yeah. And it challenges us, to really examine, are there areas where we've become complacent, or where our actions don't quite line up with the teachings that we say we value?
And that leads to, a bigger question, I think, that the text is posing, which is how would consistently embodying these teachings, how would that impact not just you, but your relationships, your community, maybe even the world around you?
That's a question worth pondering. If our faith really does inspire us to live differently, to act differently, what kind of ripple effects could that have?
It's an incredible thought to leave our listeners with today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, into spiritual responsibility. Keep exploring these ideas, guys, and let us know what you discover.
Yeah, absolutely.
See you next time.
See ya.